At my granddaughter's wedding, my daughter-in-law pointed at me and shouted, "Meet the family's biggest burden." I froze. The words hit me harder than I ever imagined they could. The room, filled with smiles and laughter just moments ago, suddenly felt suffocating. All eyes were on me, the woman who had spent decades building this family, now standing in the middle of a storm. I tried to keep my composure, tried to pretend that it didn't affect me, but deep down, a part of me broke that night. How could things have come to this? The tension in the air was thick, and all I could hear was the sound of my own heart racing in my chest. I glanced around, looking for some support, but no one stepped forward. My son, David, stood there, silent, as if he hadn't even heard the words. Lily, my daughter-in-law, stood with a smug expression, her eyes cold and calculating. This wasn't the first time she had treated me like this, but it was the first time it was done so publicly, so cruelly. I took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. This wasn't the time for weakness. I had spent too many years being the silent matriarch, the one who always put others first, who gave and gave until there was nothing left for herself. But this was different. This was the moment when I would stop pretending. This was the moment when I would show them all who I really was. The woman who had been pushed aside, humiliated, and dismissed for far too long. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I wasn't going to let this go unnoticed. I wasn't going to let my son's wife dictate my worth. I wasn't going to be a burden anymore. As I stood there, the weight of the words still hanging in the air, I made a promise to myself. Things were going to change. The days of being overlooked, of being the one who had to grin and bear it, were over. I had earned the right to be treated with respect, and I would get it, even if I had to fight for it. The silence that followed Lily's words was deafening. I could feel the weight of the stares on me, each one a judgment. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the edge of the chair. I had spent years holding my family together, sacrificing my time, my energy, and my heart, only to be discarded like an afterthought. The sting of Lily's words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I looked at David, my son, the man I had raised with all the love I had, the man who now stood by, silent and distant, as if this wasn't his mother she was humiliating. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How did we get here? How did the woman who had once been so close to me, who had called me mom, become someone who so easily dismissed me? The truth was, I had seen the signs for years. The subtle shifts, the way she began to pull David away from me, the way she made sure I was always the one left out of family gatherings. But I had ignored it. I had hoped it was just a phase, that things would get better. But now, standing in front of me, was the reality of it all. My son and his wife had grown comfortable with the idea that I didn't matter anymore. And that hurt more than anything else. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't let them see the hurt they had caused. I had been strong for so long, for everyone else. It was time for me to be strong for myself. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. My eyes met David's, and for a moment, I saw something there, something that resembled guilt. But it was gone just as quickly as it appeared. He quickly turned away, his attention back on Lily, as if nothing had happened. And that was the moment I knew. I knew that the family I had spent my life building was falling apart, and that I had to make a choice. I could stay silent, let them continue to walk all over me, or I could stand up and fight for the respect I deserved. I wasn't sure what that fight would look like yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. Not anymore. I spent the night in a quiet haze, my mind replaying the events of the day over and over again. Lily's words echoed in my ears like a constant reminder of just how little I mattered to them now. I could still feel the weight of her gaze on me, the coldness in her eyes, as if she had already made up her mind about who I was to this family. It wasn't just about that moment at the wedding. It was about everything that had led up to it. Over the years, I had watched as Lily slowly pushed me further and further away from my own son. I had tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself that it was just a phase, that things would get better. But as I sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me, I knew the truth. Things had changed, and they weren't going to get better. The next morning, I woke up early, unable to sleep any longer. The house was quiet, too quiet. The silence felt oppressive, like a heavy blanket weighing me down. I walked into the kitchen and started brewing a pot of coffee, trying to calm my nerves. But my hands trembled as I measured the coffee grounds, and I knew that the peace I had once known in this house was gone. I had always prided myself on being the one who held the family together, the one who kept everything in order. But now, I felt like an outsider in my own home. As I sat down with my coffee, I glanced at the family photo on the wall. David and I, standing side by side, smiling for the camera. I couldn't remember the last time we had shared a moment like that. The last time he had looked at me with warmth and affection instead of indifference. I hadn't just lost my husband, I had lost my son as well. I wasn't sure when it had happened, but somewhere along the way, I had become invisible to him. The thought made my chest tighten, but I refused to let myself cry. Crying wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't bring back the family I once had. I had to face this head on. The decision was clear. I could continue to play the role of the quiet, submissive mother, the one who always did what was expected of her, or I could fight for myself. It was time to take control. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I was done being the family's doormat. I wasn't going to let Lily push me out any longer. And if David couldn't see what was happening, then it was up to me to show him. I wasn't going to sit in silence and watch as they tore our family apart. I wasn't going to let them win. I spent the following days in a blur, trying to avoid confronting the reality of my situation. I busied myself with the chores I had always done, cleaning, cooking, organizing, anything to keep my mind occupied. But in the quiet moments, the weight of what had happened at the wedding settled heavily on my chest. It wasn't just the public humiliation that hurt. It was the betrayal. I had always done my best for this family. Every birthday, every holiday, every milestone, I had been there. And yet, in that moment, I realized that it had never been enough. They never saw me as an equal, as someone who deserved respect. They saw me as a burden, an obstacle to their happiness. As the days passed, I couldn't stop thinking about what Lily had said and how easily she had discarded me. It wasn't just that she had pointed at me and humiliated me in front of the entire family. It was the way she had manipulated David, turning him against me piece by piece. I had been blind to it for so long, excusing her behavior, thinking that she would change. But now I saw the truth. She had been working behind the scenes, planting seeds of doubt in David's mind, convincing him that I was the problem. I had never been good enough for her, and now, it seemed, I wasn't good enough for my son either. I could feel the walls closing in around me. The house, once full of life and laughter, now felt like a prison. I spent my days in silence, not knowing what to do or where to turn. But I knew one thing. I couldn't live like this anymore. I had to do something. I wasn't going to let them destroy me. I wasn't going to let them tear my family apart. So, I started making plans. I began researching my options, looking into legal advice, thinking about what I could do to regain some control over my life. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready to fight. I wasn't going to let Lily or anyone else dictate my worth. And I wasn't going to let David continue to ignore the truth. I had spent so many years sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of others. But now it was my turn. I had to take back my life. I had to take back my dignity. It was time to show them all that I wasn't going to just fade away quietly. I had fought too hard for too long to be silenced now. I woke up the next morning with a sense of determination I hadn't felt in a long time. The house was still eerily quiet, and as I made my way to the kitchen, I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, the only sound in the empty space. The weight of the silence was almost suffocating, but I refused to let it control me any longer. I knew what I had to do. For so many years, I had put my family's needs before my own, swallowing my pride, hiding my hurt. But not anymore. I had spent too long being invisible, ignored, pushed aside. It was time for me to be seen again, to stand up for myself, and to take back what I had lost. I sat down at the kitchen table, the sun beginning to peek through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. The coffee pot was still warm from yesterday's brew, but the mug in front of me remained untouched. I didn't need coffee this morning. I needed clarity. I needed a plan. I took a deep breath and grabbed the stack of papers I had been collecting over the past few days. Legal documents, notes, emails, everything I needed to start taking control of my future. The reality of it all hit me again as I read through the documents. I had worked for years to build this family, to help my son, to be there for everyone. And now, it felt like all of that had been thrown away. The house we had shared, the memories we had made, were now just reminders of how little I meant to them. But I couldn't focus on the past anymore. I had to think about the future. The future where I took back my power, where I wasn't a victim of their cruelty. I made a decision that day. I wasn't going to let Lily, or anyone else for that matter, control my life any longer. I would fight for what was mine, for the respect I deserved, and for my own peace of mind. I called a lawyer that afternoon, making arrangements to discuss my options, to see what I could do to protect myself and my future. It wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had spent too long hiding behind the scenes, too long letting others dictate my worth. It was time for me to step into the light, to reclaim my dignity. No matter how hard it was, no matter what it took, I was ready. I had the power within me, and it was time to use it. I sat in the lawyer's office the next afternoon, my hands folded tightly in my lap. The room felt too formal, too impersonal for what I was about to do. I had always prided myself on being strong, on handling everything on my own. But today, for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of uncertainty. The lawyer, a tall man with graying hair and a serious expression, sat across from me, his eyes scanning the papers in front of him. He had been kind enough when I called earlier, offering me an appointment the same day. Now, as he reviewed the documents, I couldn't help but feel exposed, as if all my secrets were laid bare on that table. "Martha, I've gone through everything you provided," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You have every right to contest the actions of your son and his wife. If you're ready to take legal action, we can proceed. But it will not be easy. It will be a long fight." I nodded, my throat tight. "I'm ready," I replied, though my voice barely recognized itself. I had spent so many years being silent, bearing the pain in solitude. But now I was done. I had reached my breaking point. I wasn't going to let them take away what was mine. The lawyer gave me a sympathetic glance, but I could see the determination in his eyes. "Good," he said. "We'll begin by securing your rights to the property and assets, and from there, we'll see what the next steps will be." I couldn't believe this was my reality now. A year ago, I never would have imagined I'd be sitting here, planning to fight for what I had worked my entire life to build. But things had changed. My family had changed, and I wasn't going to allow myself to be pushed aside any longer. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt a small flicker of hope for the first time in days. The road ahead would be difficult, and I knew there would be obstacles, but I had made my decision. I was no longer going to be a silent observer in my own life. I was going to take control, no matter what it took. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the moonlight spilling through the window, and I finally allowed myself to breathe. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting for myself. And that fight, I realized, was worth every ounce of strength I had left. I had no idea how much time had passed since the last time I saw David and Lily. The weeks blurred together, each day a haze of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings. I had become accustomed to the weight of it all, the slow grind of building my case, and the emotional toll it took. But it was a necessary step, and I could feel the shift in myself. For the first time, I felt like I was taking control of my life. My lawyer had guided me through the legal complexities, but I knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge lay in what came next. I needed to face my son. I hadn't seen him since that day at the wedding. He had called a few times, but each time I let the phone ring out. I wasn't ready to talk to him, not yet. Not until I knew what I was going to say. But as I sat in the quiet of my living room, staring at the phone, I realized I couldn't keep running from this. I had to confront him. I had to tell him the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I dialed his number, my fingers trembling slightly as I pressed the buttons. When he answered, there was a pause, and I could hear the tension in his voice. "Mom, is everything okay?" he asked, his tone distant. I took a deep breath. "David, we need to talk. It's time." There was another long pause, and I could hear him shifting on the other end. "About what?" he asked, his voice now tinged with uncertainty. I felt a surge of anger rise in me, but I pushed it down. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about me. About everything, David. About Lily, about the house, about what's been happening between us. I can't pretend everything is fine anymore. I'm done pretending. I could hear him let out a sigh. "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about." His words stung, but I pressed on. "You're not blind, David. You've seen it. You've seen how she's treated me, how she's pushed me out of your life. And now, she's trying to take everything. I won't let her." I waited, my heart pounding as I listened for his response. "Mom, I don't want to get into this right now. We're in a good place. Can't we just leave things alone? His words were weak, and I felt the last thread of hope I had in him slip away. No, David. We're not in a good place. You've been letting her control everything, and I can't be a part of it anymore. There was a silence on the other end, and I knew he was trying to process what I had said. I didn't wait for him to speak again. I've hired a lawyer, and I'm fighting for what's mine. I won't let her take everything from me. The words felt heavy as they left my lips, but I knew they were true. I'll be filing for my rights, and I'm not going to back down. There was a long silence, and I could hear the conflict in David's voice. I don't know what to say, Mom. His voice broke, and for a brief moment, I thought I heard regret in his words. But I wasn't sure if it was real. Say whatever you want, David. But know this. I'm doing this for me, not for anyone else. I'm done being silent. I'm done being invisible. I hung up before he could respond, the finality of it settling over me like a weight. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The first step was done. Now, I could move forward, with or without him. I hadn't heard from David since our conversation. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between us grew louder. I spent most of my time working through the paperwork, reviewing every detail with my lawyer, and mentally preparing for the fight ahead. But the absence of communication with my son weighed heavily on me. It felt like a chasm was opening between us, one that I wasn't sure could ever be crossed again. As I sat in my living room one evening, going through some old family photos, I came across a picture of David when he was just a boy. He was sitting on my lap, smiling up at me with those bright eyes I remembered so well. The memory brought a lump to my throat. How had we gone from that to this? How had he become someone who could so easily dismiss me, the woman who had raised him, loved him unconditionally? I placed the photo back in the drawer, my heart aching. The sound of the doorbell broke my thoughts. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something made me get up and answer it. As I opened the door, I was surprised to see David standing there, his face unreadable. "Mom," he said, his voice soft. I didn't know what to say. My heart raced in my chest, a mix of anger and hope rising within me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, looking at each other. "I didn't know what else to do," David finally said, his voice tinged with regret. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About everything." I crossed my arms over my chest, trying to keep my composure. "You should have thought about it a long time ago, David. Before this all started." His eyes lowered, and for a moment, he seemed lost in thought. "I'm sorry," he said, almost in a whisper. "I should have stood up for you. I should have seen what was happening." His words were small, but they held a weight I hadn't expected. I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to tell him that it was going to be okay. But I couldn't. Not yet. "Sorry doesn't fix everything, David," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You've let her manipulate you for years. You've let her tear this family apart. And now, I'm the one left to pick up the pieces." He nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "I know, and I don't know how to make it right. But I want to try." I looked at him for a long moment. There was something different in his eyes, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Sincerity. But even with that, the damage had been done. It was going to take more than just words to heal the rift between us. I stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in," I said, my voice softer now. "But understand this, David. I'm fighting for my dignity, for my future. And you're either going to be with me, or you're not. There's no middle ground anymore." He walked in quietly, and I closed the door behind him, knowing that this moment, this conversation, was just the beginning of a much longer journey. One that neither of us knew how it would end, but it was a journey I was finally ready to face, no matter where it led. I sat across from David at the kitchen table, the weight of what we were both feeling hanging between us. The silence was thick, but it was a different kind of silence than before. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of possibilities, full of the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could start to rebuild something. He had apologized, and part of me wanted to believe it. Part of me wanted to believe that this was the beginning of the healing process, the first step toward making things right again. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt the most, remained cautious. Trust didn't come easily anymore. I had spent so many years putting the needs of others before my own, sacrificing my happiness for the sake of keeping the peace. And look where it had gotten me. Look where it had gotten us. "What do we do now?" David asked, his voice quieter now, almost uncertain. I could tell he was struggling with the reality of the situation. He was torn between the loyalty he felt for Lily and the guilt he felt for how he had treated me. And I could see it in his eyes, the confusion, the pain, the regret. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. I had come this far, and I wasn't going to back down now. We moved forward, I said, my voice steady but firm. We face the truth, and we start over. I'm not going to wait around for things to magically get better. We both have to put in the work. David nodded slowly, as if absorbing the weight of my words. I understand, he said quietly. I've been blind to what's been going on, but I'm not blind anymore. The sincerity in his voice made my heart ache. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he was finally ready to see what had been happening, what Lily had been doing to me, to us. But I also knew that actions spoke louder than words. Actions matter more than words, I said, looking him directly in the eye. I need you to show me, David. I need you to show me that you're not just saying what you think I want to hear. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and determination. I will, he promised. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't ready to forgive him fully, not yet. But I was willing to give him a chance. A small chance. The chance to prove that he could be the son I had always hoped for. The son I had raised with love and care. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But it was a start. As we sat there, both lost in our thoughts, I realized that this was only the beginning of the journey. There were still so many battles to fight, so many things to fix. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was no longer fighting alone. And that, I realized, was all I needed to keep moving forward.